So today's agenda, we'll be looking at the ISO 27000 series and taking security beyond the checkbox. We'll take a look at some of the mandatory documents that are required for 27001 certification, and also look at how applying the controls from Annex A can help you with your HIPAA compliance. We'll also be looking a little bit at risk assessments and the statement of applicability, and we'll try to leave some time at the end to answer some of your questions. So let's get started with the webinar. So beyond the checkbox, just to give you some background into the 27000 series, back in 1989 in the UK, the Department of Trade and Industry was tasked with creating security evaluation criteria for IT products and also a code of practice for information security. So this is a long time ago now. From this directive was born the Information Technology Security Evaluation Criteria, and that was first published in 1990. From this, a code of practice called PD003 was published in 1993, and this became British Standard 7799 way back in 1995. This British Standard then went international in 2000 as ISO 17799, and in 2005 became the fledgling 27000 series that we know and love today. So today there are 32 published documents, but only one of those, 27001, is used for the certification purposes. All those other documents provide a range of guides and security techniques to complement the overall security management system initiative. So let's talk a little bit about an ISMS, so Information Security Management System. What this does is it preserves the confidentiality, integrity and availability of information by applying a risk management process. So let's look at some of the fundamental principles that contribute to a successful ISMS. Awareness of the need for information security is obviously very, very important. Assignment of responsibility. Management commitment. We can't get anywhere with any sort of management system without executive commitment and approval to the process. Implementing controls to reach acceptable levels of risk. Prevention and detection of information security incidents. And a continual process of reassessment and improvement to the system. So those are the core principles of a solid ISMS. Let's talk about some of the benefits of implementing an ISMS. So a well-implemented ISMS should really lead to a reduction in the number of security incidents. That's obviously the overall target. Risk and vulnerability assessments will help to identify those areas where extra controls are required. And a continual cycle of reviewing and planning will improve the ISMS itself. ISO 27000 also requires the considerations of interested parties to be taken into account. So these could include employees, shareholders, government agencies, emergency services, clients and customers, suppliers and partners. Anybody that has a vested interest in the security of the data that you are holding. And by proactively reducing the number of risks and security incidents, there can be a very tangible return on investment for implementing an ISMS. So a reduction in fines, reduction in audit fees, reduced insurance premiums, etc. In addition to the reduction of the number of security incidents, the cost for correction should always also decrease. So as we get more used to the way that the system is working, the process itself improves and it reduces costs. Protection of brand and reputation. In 2014 alone, how about Target, Home Depot, P.F. Chang's? What would they pay now for protection for their brand and reputation? ISO 27000 can help achieve that. And being ISO 27001 certified could even be a deciding factor in an RFP process. So it really does give you a competitive advantage. And when dealing with companies outside the USA, it may even be a disqualifier if you're not certified. And for organizations with multiple sites, both nationally and internationally, the 27000 certification is a display of consistency across all of the sites. So again, that leads to credibility. So when I say beyond the checkbox, what do I mean? Well, compliance and conformance does not necessarily equate to 100% security of data. Target, for example, were considered to conform to PCI DSS requirements. That's the payment card industry security requirements. but they still managed to lose 110 million customer credit and debit card details. So rather than having a checkbox approach, we use a risk-based approach. And by doing that, we stand a better chance of plugging the vulnerabilities and mitigating the risks. So unlike periodic auditing, which is really just a snapshot in time, the risk-based approach is a living, breathing, perpetual process which provides constant input to the information security management system. Now, when I say about a risk-based approach, I don't mean to undervalue the importance of audits. Periodic internal and external audits do help keep the scope and the focus of the ISMS on track and really are an essential part of the process. And by having ISMS objectives which are more aggressive than the strongest legislation, we can then raise the bar of information security using best practices. Similarly, compliance audits themselves are still a very important part of the overall business process. Executive leadership and other interested parties still need to know that they're in compliance with HIPAA, HITECH, Sarbanes-Oxley, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, etc. So planning for and passing such audits should really be an integral part of the scope of the ISMS. I've mentioned a few times the words conformance and compliance, so let me just clarify that there is a difference between the two. A non-compliance is the failure to adhere to an act or its regulations, so for example HIPAA. A non-conformance is the failure to comply with a requirement, standard or procedure, so for example ISO 27000. Let me give you a working example. So HITECH, section 13402, that requires that all notifications required under this section shall be made without unreasonable delay and in no case later than 60 calendar days after the discovery of a breach. So HITECH says 60 days. Your own ISMS may say 15 days. That's an internal goal of the company that breaches will be notified within 15 days. So as an example, if the breach notification goes out on day 10, then you're still in conformance and you're still in compliance. If the breach goes out, notification goes out on day 30, then you're in non-conformance with your ISMS, but you're still in compliance with the law. And a breach notification on day 70, well then you're in non-conformance and non-compliance. So that equals big trouble. So let's take a look at some of the mandatory documents that are required for certification to 27001-2013. There are 16 documents or document sets that are required for certification. And the scope of the IMS, setting that scope is vital. If you set the scope too wide, it will make certification a very difficult process. Set it too narrow, and the ISMS may not add sufficient value to the organization and may not protect the data that is the object of the ISMS. So the key advice to setting the scope is always follow the data. Wherever the data to be protected is physically, technically, and administratively, those areas should be in scope. So after defining the scope, communicating the security policy to all interested parties is the next step. Everyone that needs to know should be aware of the policy and the importance of their role within the ISMS. Risk assessments, treatments and statements of applicability we'll actually discuss in a few more slides' time, a little bit more detail. The policy itself should specifically contain a section on security objectives. If it doesn't, it should at least provide a formal framework for setting those objectives. As evidence of competence, an auditor will certainly be looking for demonstrated ability, not just a resume. So make sure you have documented performance reviews, education and training. All of these things are required to prove that a person is competent to perform the work that affects information security. The extent of documented evidence can vary depending on the size of the organization and the types of activities within the scope, and these should be really agreed with your certifying auditor very, very early in the process of certification. So if you are looking to do a formal certification, identify the certifying body that you want to work with and ask their auditors for help as to exactly what will be deemed as documented evidence. Section 6 in the standard deals with the planning of the ISMS. Section 8 is about the operation. So this is where the policies and processes of the ISMS are used in real life. and these results must be documented. So for example, the results of risk assessments, the results of risk treatments, etc. Section 9, this deals with the performance evaluation. So outputs from the planning and operational phases should become inputs into a formal process of monitoring, measuring and auditing. The reviews conducted in Section 9 then provide input to Section 10, which defines improvement in the ISMS. So finding non-conformities, their subsequent corrective actions, plus a cycle of continual improvement, and the evidence of results of corrective actions. Okay, so let's move on to the next module. Annex A and a crosswalk to HIPAA. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with the way that the HIPAA requirements are broken down, but let's just take a quick look at them and compare them to the ISO 27000 requirements. So HIPAA contains 3 safeguards in the security rule. They are administrative, physical and technical. Within those safeguards we have 18 standards and 36 implementation specifications. Those standards and implementation specifications can be required or addressable, and everything that you do within HIPAA must be reasonable and appropriate. So let's see how that compares to 27000. So within 27001, the 2013 version, we have 14 security control clauses, 35 categories, and 114 controls. Those 114 controls appear in Annex A, and they provide the minimum required controls. And we'll talk a little bit about the statement of applicability later. All these controls must be addressed, and whereas we had reasonable and appropriate with HIPAA, with ISO we have adequate and proportionate. So in the following slides we're going to look at 4 examples of how 27000 addresses specific HIPAA rules. And again, these are just examples. So HIPAA requires all workforce members to have appropriate access rights to EPHI. In 27000 we have Control A91, which sets the objective to limit access to information and information processing facilities. In 9.2 we talk about user access management. And 27002, which is the guidelines, that provides further guidance on implementing the policy to ensure that it is the asset owners that determine the appropriate access control rules. So that's very important. It's the asset owners that determine that. Too often it's the decisions are left up to the IT guys, and this can lead to inconsistencies between access rights and information classification. So it's good that 27000 just takes us that extra step and gives us that guidance that yes, it's the asset owners that have to determine it, nobody else. HIPAA requires security awareness and training for all members of the workforce. And within 27000 we have something similar. We have human resources security, and A722 provides extra guidance on security awareness and training by adding contractors to the list of people who should receive appropriate awareness, education and training. So as well as the regular employees, it's saying yes, we need to take that step further because contractors could come into contact with EPHI as well. And an interesting addition to the 27000 guidance is that the awareness program should really not only focus on the what and the how, but also the why. Why are people told not to click on links? Why are people told not to go to certain websites? Why are people told not to download unapproved software? So really that gives the extra personal accountability for the actions and inactions of your employees. 27000 series has 5 controls which can be directly mapped to the HIPAA requirement for security incident procedures. The 16.1 section on management of information security incidents, that deals with the responsibilities and procedures, the reporting of security events and weaknesses, assessment of security events, and also the response to information security incidents. The controls in ISO 27000 tend to be geared to smaller entities. So if you are in a medium or a larger organization, I would also consider looking at 27035, which really gives a much more detailed and structured and planned approach to security incident procedures. Risk analysis is a required implementation specification in the HIPAA security rule, and in the planning section of 27001 there are specific clauses which address defining and applying an information security risk assessment process as well as a risk treatment process. So at the operational level, the organisation should perform security risk assessments at planned intervals usually annually, but if you have a very dynamic environment, maybe more frequently. But certainly when significant changes are proposed or occur, then you should also consider redoing your risk assessments. Okay, before we move on to the final module, just a quick commercial break to tell you about some of the services that EC-FAIRST does offer. All of the services that we offer can be found on the cybersecurity portal, which is available at ecfairst.com/cyber. And EC-FAIRST, we have over 2,100 clients served by EC-FAIRST, and we provide a unique business-driven compliance and security solution. So it's not necessarily just a technical focus, but it's business-driven. And EC-FAIRST is also home to the HIPAA Academy. And just a quick look at some of the training courses that we offer. We have a certified HIPAA professional course. That does a step through of all of the major sections of HIPAA, high-tech and the Omnibus Final Rule, a review of the High-Tech Act. The class examines the HIPAA privacy and security rules, as well as the transaction code sets and identifiers. We help you review the compliance challenges that you face. We walk through some of the best practices and also step through how to plan and prepare for HIPAA compliance. For a wider study of compliance in general, EC-FAIRST also offers a CSCS class. That's the Certified Security Compliance Specialist. That class also examines HIPAA and high-tech, but also it covers some of the other compliance and regulatory requirements such as FSMA, NERC, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. For people who process credit cards, we look at the core requirements of PCI DSS. We also touch on the 27000 series. EC-FAIRST also looks at some of the California information security breach laws, federal, state regulations, that sort of thing, and also an understanding of the NIST security standards. We just completed a very successful week in Orlando in January. Next month we're moving on to Houston and then on to Chicago in April. And later in the year we also have public classes in Philadelphia, San Jose, Memphis, Las Vegas, and January next year we'll be moving back to Florida. For those of you that are looking to implement 27000, we do have a range of policy templates. The contact details are up there for Lorna Wagner if you'd like to discuss specific requirements. And again, these slides will be shared on our website and sent out to attendees of the webinar, so the contact details will be in there. For those who like the self-service type of implementation, we do provide a 27000 information security bundle. That includes all of the templates. We provide you with a vulnerability assessment. We also have you invited to the CSCS training class. We provide a year's worth of security reminders and 5 hours of on-demand consulting from the EC-FAIRST experts. For larger organizations, we do have a managed compliance service program, and that's designed to assist healthcare organizations and business associates to manage their compliance requirements, so security, core components, and the infrastructure. We do have a 5-year compliance plan, and we do guaranteed pricing for ease of budgeting, and also we have an interest-free monthly payment plan and discounts for long-term commitments. So again, all of this and more available at the ecfairst.com/cyber. So let's go back to the webinar and let's look at the importance of risk assessments and the statements of applicability. So as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing to do when you're looking at risk assessment and setting the scope of your ISMS is follow the data. So you should be defining the criteria for accepting risk. And the most important thing I think with a risk assessment is that it should be repeatable. You should use a method that produces consistent results. And we said 27002 also takes us to the next level. HIPAA isn't very prescriptive. 27002 gives us a lot clearer guidance. So it says you must really identify and involve the risk owners. Identify all of the consequences and likelihood. And when you're looking at your risk index, you take the impact of the risk event and multiply that by the probability of occurrence. So then you can help get a priority for the risks and vulnerabilities that you face in your organization. There must be a well-documented process for risk treatment, and we use the acronym RATE, When you identify a risk, you can reduce the risk, reduce the severity of the loss or the likelihood of the loss from occurring by implementing controls and processes. You can accept the risk. Acceptance is also about accepting residual risk after other risk treatments have been applied. You can transfer the risk, so maybe share with another party the burden of the loss or the benefit of the gain from the risk. Now, a lot of people often cite insurance as a way of transferring risk. The word of caution on that, the insurance only provides for financial compensation after a vulnerability has been compromised. So you're already in security incident mode, and yes, you have that fallback that you have financial cover, but it's already happened. You've already got the loss maybe to PR. You're out there on the 6 o'clock news. So just be very careful about using insurance companies as a way of transferring risk. You cannot abdicate the risk. As the final rule has said that business associates now must be responsible. So you cannot abdicate the risk. It's still your risk, even though you may have insurance policies in place. So a quick look at the statement of applicability. This document is the main link between the risk assessment and the treatment of the risks and your information security program. It is a mandatory document as specified in 27000, and its purpose is to define which of the controls or security measures from Annex A will apply to your ISMS. Now, all of them must be addressed, and you must state there why. You must have a justification as to why any of them may have been excluded from the scope of your management system. It's very important to note that this should never be considered an overhead document. We don't want this document just sat on a shelf gathering dust. It should be the cornerstone of the whole management system for security, and it's a working document that should be readily referenced and updated by anyone with an interest in the security of your data and the related processes. And when you're certified to 27001, auditors will use the statement of applicability as a guide to the entire business process. So it's very important that this is a living, breathing, working document. And one very important point there, you're not just limited to the controls that are defined by Annex A. So where you have any gaps, so for example HIPAA, there may be some of the requirements in HIPAA which are not covered by 27001. So what you have to do is add those clauses into your statement of applicability so that the auditor knows that you're addressing those controls. Okay, so in conclusion, we looked at taking the 27000 series beyond the checkbox. We had a look at some of the mandatory documents that were required for certification. We looked at a couple of examples of how HIPAA requirements can be mapped back to Annex A. And we scratched the surface a little bit of risk assessments and the statements of applicability. My email address is up there. It's ian.walters@ecfirst.com. I would welcome your emails with questions, comments, suggestions, anything you like. I'm also on LinkedIn, Ian Robert Walters. And of course, please do visit our cyber portal at ecfirst.com/cyber. Okay, I'd like to wish you all a secure and compliant day, and thank you all for attending.